47 minutes before I was supposed to leave for my daughter's graduation, both of my brothers canceled the 4 days they had promised our mother. Their message ended with 2 words: "You'll understand." My suitcase stood beside Mom's walker. If I stayed, I would miss Lena crossing the stage. If I left, I had to know Mom would be safe. I read the message aloud to her and asked, "Do you still want me to call Mara?" Mom looked at the clock, then at me. "Call her. Then go see your girl graduate." That was the first thing I did differently. I did not call either brother and ask him to reconsider. I called the woman Mom, and I had already chosen for exactly this kind of failure. Mara Bell answered on the 3rd ring. "Ellen? Is this about the weekend?" "Pod." The family coverage fell through. She did not ask for the family story. 6 weeks earlier, she and Mom had sat at this same kitchen table for almost an hour. Mom had asked Mara whether she played cards, whether she minded old westerns, and whether she knew that cinnamon and coffee was a terrible idea. Mara had said yes, no, and absolutely. Mom liked her. We had paid a small fee to hold the 4 days. Nate had called that wasteful. Paul had called it dramatic. I had called it a backup plan after Nate forgot one Saturday afternoon and left Mom waiting in her coat for a grocery trip. Mara said, "I can be there at 9:30, as planned." Relief came so fast, it embarrassed me. I had spent years treating everyone else's kept promise as the price of my rest. Mom heard Mara through the speaker and raised one finger. "Tell her I bought the decent tea," she said. Mara laughed. "Then I am definitely coming." I gave her the short version of the handoff we had already discussed. Mom handled her own calls, money, choices, and schedule. She needed help carrying laundry down the basement steps, rides when the distance was too far for her, and a steady arm on bad mornings. She did not need anyone to talk over her. At 9:28, Mara's blue car pulled up. She came in carrying a canvas bag and the mystery novel Mom had recommended during their interview. There was no miracle in her arrival. There was preparation, paid for and agreed to before the emergency. By 10 o'clock, Mom was safe and my suitcase was in the car. That solved the first problem. It exposed the larger one. What would my brothers do when my sacrifice was no longer the solution? I checked the front door, kissed Mom's forehead, and lifted my suitcase. "Ellen," she said. I turned. "When you come home, we're changing who gets to make promises for me." I wanted to ask what she meant. The clock gave me no room, and maybe Mom knew I would spend the entire drive designing an answer for her if she explained. "All right," I said. "No." She gave me the look that had once stopped 3 children from arguing in the grocery aisle. "Don't solve it on the highway. Go!" So I went. What we had called helping. My name is Ellen Mercer. I was 58 that spring, divorced for 11 years and living 12 minutes from my mother in Marlow, Ohio. Nate lived 40 minutes north. Paul lived an hour west. Distance had become the family explanation for why I did the ordinary things. Tuesday groceries, Thursday laundry, rides to the library, light bulbs, storm windows, and the appointments Mom wanted company for. I did not resent those things. That was part of why the arrangement lasted. Mom and I enjoyed each other. On grocery days, she studied every tomato as if one of them had applied for a job. On Thursdays, we watched half an old movie while the washing machine ran. I knew which steps made her knee hesitate, and she knew when I was pretending not to be tired. The problem was everything that grew around those hours. Nate would text, "Can you remind me I'm taking Mom Saturday?" Paul would say, "Tell Mom I'll call after dinner," as if the telephone network passed through my kitchen. If Nate was late, I called him before Mom had to. If Paul forgot, I made a reason sound believable. If a weekend needed coverage, I opened the shared calendar, proposed dates, followed up, adjusted the dates, and filled whatever remained. My brothers would point to the colored squares and say the system worked. They did not notice I was the system. The graduation weekend had been on the calendar for 4 months. Lena had finished a part-time master's degree while working full-time at a public library in Kentucky. She had taken night classes, written papers at her kitchen table, and once joined an online seminar from her parked car because a storm had knocked out her power. Nate chose Thursday and Friday. Paul chose Saturday and Sunday. They both clicked the word confirmed. 3 weeks before the trip, I asked them to spend one afternoon with Mom and go over the routine she wanted. Nate sent a thumbs up. Paul said there was nothing complicated about sitting with your own mother. 10 days before, I asked again. Nate wrote, "Ellen, we said we have it." I let the sentence embarrass me into silence. Mom did not. The next morning, she slid Mara's business card across the table. "Hold the weekend," she said. "They'll be offended. They don't have to know unless they make it necessary." I should have heard the weariness beneath that. Instead, I treated the reservation as insurance and kept maintaining the main plan. Now, 20 minutes into my drive, Nate's name filled the screen on my dashboard. I pulled into a rest area before answering. "Where are you?" he asked. "On my way to Kentucky." "So who's with Mom?" "Maribel, the companion Mom interviewed." "You brought a stranger into Mom's house?" Code chose Mara. "They met 6 weeks ago." "This is exactly what I mean," he said. "You make decisions and then tell us after." I looked through the windshield at a family folding themselves back into a minivan. A man held the door while a woman counted heads. Nobody looked heroic. They were simply finishing the task in front of them. "You canceled 47 minutes before I left," I said. "Mom is safe, and she wanted me to go." Pod didn't cancel for fun. Pod I had not asked why. His defensiveness supplied the fact before I needed it. "The lake weekend has been planned for months," he said. "Paul's already there." "The cabin deposit is non-refundable." Then you chose the lake weekend." Pod, that sentence hurt more than the cancellation. He said it as praise. Paul sent 3 messages while Nate was talking. The first asked for Mara's full schedule. The second asked whether I had left written instructions. The third said that if I sent him a complete list, he would review it from the cabin. I gave Nate Mara's number for an emergency and told him Mom would answer her own phone. "I'm driving now," I said. "Ellen, don't turn this into something." "Pod have to. It already cost something." Pod. Then I silenced the family thread until I reached Lena. Before I put the phone away, her message appeared beneath my brothers' names. It was a picture of her graduation gown draped across a chair. The seat beside it was empty. "Drive safe, Mom. I saved you a place." Lena lived in a second-floor apartment above a bakery that started work before dawn. By the time I arrived, the hallway smelled like bread and rain. She opened the door before I knocked. "You made it!" Bedwords were simple. Her face was not. Relief crossed it before she smiled, and that told me she had expected less than she had asked for. I said I would. "You say a lot of things before Grandma needs something." There was no accusation in her voice. She took my suitcase, set it inside, and hugged me. I called Mom before the ceremony. She told me Mara made weak tea but excellent scrambled eggs. Mara, somewhere behind her, protested that Mom had requested the tea that way. "Are you comfortable?" I asked. "Yes." "Pod, do you need anything?" "I need you to stop asking the same question in different clothes." Lena laughed from the bathroom, where she was pinning her hair. Mom heard her. "Is that my graduate?" Pod handed Lena the phone. They spoke directly for 10 minutes. I stood by the window with nothing to translate. At the arena, Lena touched my purse. "Put your phone in there." Pod starts. "Cut it off." Pod. "Grandma has Mara." Your brothers have phones. If something is truly wrong, it will still be wrong when the ceremony ends. Petter drive her down. The empty seat she had saved was in the 6th row. When the graduates walked in, she searched the crowd until she found me. Her shoulders dropped. I had spent years telling myself that adult children did not need their mothers with the same urgency older parents sometimes did. Lena could feed herself, drive herself, and manage a fever without me. Watching her search for me in that crowd showed me how narrow my definition of need had become. When her name was called, I stood with everyone else. I did not shout. Lena had warned me that if I brought a cowbell, she would move and leave no forwarding address. I clapped until my palms stung, and she smiled directly at the 6th row. Afterward, we took pictures under a gray sky. In one, she held her diploma cover against her chest and leaned her head on my shoulder. In another, we were both laughing because the wind had blown her cap into a hedge. For 3 hours, nothing required me to arrange another adult's good intentions. That evening, after the restaurant had closed its kitchen, Lena and I found a diner near her apartment. The waitress brought coffee in thick white mugs and called both of us honey. Lena peeled the paper from her straw into a long spiral. "Can I tell you something without you explaining?" I almost smiled at how accurately she knew me. "I'll try. I told you graduation was just walking across a stage, because I thought that would make it easier for you to miss. Pod wouldn't have missed it." I wrapped both hands around my mug. "You asked me not to explain." Pod, bed? She named the day she moved into this apartment, and I arrived after dark because Paul had forgotten Mom's ride home from the dentist. She named her 31st birthday when I left before cake because Nate was late relieving me. She named the week her engagement ended, when she told me over the phone that she was fine because I was sitting in an urgent care waiting room with Mom. "Grandma needed you," she said. "I'm not competing with her. I just learned to make my things small before you had to." There are apologies people use to end discomfort, and there are apologies that make you remain inside it. I stayed. "You should not have had to make yourself easy to lose," I said. Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. "I loved taking care of Grandma," I continued. "But I let everyone turn my reliability into a reason you should expect less. I helped teach you that. What happens now?" My first instinct was to promise everything. That was how I created trouble. I answered grief with a schedule large enough to silence it. "1 Sunday a month," I said. "You and me." We picked the dates 3 months at a time. I don't cancel unless there is an actual emergency, and being the only person who planned ahead does not count as one. Podna considered that. "Start with next month." "Well, right. And I choose the first Sunday." Pod Yuli were power hungry. She smiled. "I learned from Grandma." My phone was full of messages when we returned to the apartment. I read Mom's voicemail first. "Mara asked what I wanted for breakfast," she said. "Nobody has asked it that plainly in a while." Stop checking. We are fine. Ped family thread was less peaceful. The key in the lock. Nate's messages moved from concern to injury in under an hour. "I can't believe you left Mom with paid help. At least send us the full plan." This is what happens when one person controls everything. Paul had reacted to the last message with a thumbs up. I did not answer. That was not restraint at first. It was exhaustion. The next afternoon, Mom called while Lena and I were choosing sandwiches for the drive home. "Your brother is here," she said. "Which one?" "The loud one." Date's voice came through the phone. "I can hear you, Mom." "Bead, and you know I said it on purpose." Pod stepped away from the counter. "Did you two arrange a visit?" "He used his key," Mom said. My brothers and I each had a spare. Mom had given them to us after her knee became unreliable on stairs. The keys were for agreed visits and emergencies. Over time, Nate had begun letting himself in whenever he wanted to demonstrate that he had come. "I drove back early to check on her," he said. Behind him, Mara asked Mom whether she wanted more tea. Nate answered for her. "She's had enough." Mom said, "Ruth is in the room." Pod's eye cabinet close. "Ellen," Nate said, "tell this woman she can leave. I'm here now." That request would once have set me moving. I would have thanked Mara, adjusted the payment, called Paul, and praised Nate for arriving. By dinner, everyone would remember that he had rescued the weekend. Instead, I asked Mom, "What do you want?" "I want Mara to stay until the time we agreed." "Then that's what happens." Pod exhaled sharply. "You two made a decision without us." Pod's mom's afternoon. Pod using her to prove a point. Padia waited for Mom to answer. The silence felt dangerous because I had spent years filling it before anyone else had to reveal himself. "Nate," she said, "I want you to go home for tonight." "Kid." Pod came in without calling. "You spoke around me. Now you're making Ellen responsible for the words coming out of my mouth. I'm worried about you." "Then listen to me." Bed stayed quiet. "We'll talk when Ellen gets back," Mom said. All four of us. Nate left. Mara remained. Nobody won the afternoon. But a key that had once meant help now meant something else, and all of us knew it. 3 questions. I drove home the next morning. The rain had passed, and the fields beside the highway looked rinsed clean. For the first hour, I built a new care schedule in my head. Nate could take 2 Saturdays a month. Paul could pay for one of Mara's visits if driving was truly difficult. I could create a cancellation policy, a reminder sequence, and an emergency list. By the county line, I had designed a system so careful that nobody could fail unless he worked at it. At home, I opened my laptop and started typing. Mom called before I finished the first week. "Are you making another chart?" "Pick." "Delete it." "Pod, we need to discuss why their word becomes your work." "Pod." Mom said she wanted Mara twice a week. She could afford it if she cut one expense she no longer cared about, and she had already asked Mara if Tuesdays and Thursdays were possible. On other days, Mom wanted calls and visits offered directly to her. She did not want me assigning sons to shifts like reluctant employees. What if they don't offer enough? Then we will know what they are offering. And if you need more? Pod, you can say what you can do. Mara can say what she can do. Your brothers can say what they can do. The answer cannot keep being whatever you can force into a colored square. I looked at the schedule on my screen. It was beautiful. It was also a machine built to conceal the same problem. I deleted it. In its place, I wrote 3 questions. What does Mom want? What will each of us personally promise? What will we do when a promise changes? I sent my brothers the meeting time and those questions. Nothing else. Nate replied, "Fine. Have your trial." Paul sent a thumbs up. Mom and I met Mara at the kitchen table when I returned. I had expected to ask whether anything had gone wrong. Mom began by telling me what had gone right. Mara had helped with laundry and rides. Mom had chosen her own meals. They had watched one bad Western and abandoned another. Mom had missed me, disliked Nate's entrance, and discovered she enjoyed hours in which nobody acted as though helping her required taking over the room. "I don't want to replace family with hired company," she said. "I want to stop using you to manufacture family." Pod looked down at her tea. She had no role in the argument, and she never tried to claim one. After she left, Mom opened the small drawer by the telephone. 2 paper key tags lay inside. One marked Nate and one Paul. She put them beside the 3 questions. Nate arrived 7 minutes early. Paul came 12 minutes late. Mom sat in her blue chair by the window. I took the end of the couch. The other two chairs faced her, though Nate moved his so he could look at me instead. "Let's see the plan," he said. "There isn't one," I told him. "Then why are we here?" Pod tapped the paper in her lap. "Because I have a plan for my care." "I don't have a plan for your promises." She explained that Mara would come Tuesdays and Thursdays. I would continue my regular Tuesday evening visit and help with specific rides I accepted. Everything else would be arranged directly with her. Nate folded his arms. "So we pay a stranger while Ellen keeps the convenient parts." "Pod didn't ask you to pay," Mom said. "That isn't the point." "Bed, tell me the point." "Paid." "Fine. Alternate weekends." "Paul and I can do alternate weekends." Pod shifted. "Depending on work?" "Of course, depending on work," Nate said. "Ellen can confirm on Thursday and adjust if somebody has a conflict." "No," I said. Nate frowned. "No to what?" "I won't confirm your visits, remind you, or adjust if you cancel. If you offer Mom a Saturday, you put it on the calendar yourself. If it changes, you tell her. The calendar was your idea, and I am changing how I use it." Pod leaned forward. "I could help pay for some extra hours if you handle the details." "No." Pod, Pick Mom did not ask you for money. She asked you to speak for yourself. Bed looked at her then, briefly. "I live an hour away," he said. "I know where you live," Mom replied. "My schedule changes." "Kid, don't promise until you know." Pod stood and walked to the window. "This is ridiculous." "Families adjust." "Pod, I have been adjusting," I said. "Because you are good at it. That doesn't make your word my assignment." Pod, a moment. Nobody spoke. Nate returned to his chair. "All right. I'll take every other Saturday. You can send me a reminder Friday." "No." "Pod's a text, Ellen." "Bed, set one on your own phone." "Pod, I want to stop being responsible for whether you succeed." Pedge's face changed. I had said no before in my life, but usually with an apology attached or a substitute already prepared. This no left the work where it belonged. Paul's voice was quiet. "Then what exactly are you for?" The question landed so cleanly that I could not pretend he meant the calendar. I thought of the grocery aisle, the laundry room, Mom's appointments, Lena's empty seat. I thought of all the times usefulness had allowed me to avoid asking whether I was loved when I was not solving something. "I'm her daughter," I said. "I am not the family switchboard." Pod looked away. "I will keep the promises I make to Mom. I will help in an emergency. I will not remind you, substitute for you, explain you, or apologize for you. If that means there are fewer colored squares, then at least the squares will be true." Paget laughed once, without humor. "And this came from one weekend?" "No," Mom said. "One weekend made us stop calling it normal." Ped reached for the key tags. Mom held one tag in each hand. "I want these back," she said. Nate stared at her. "You're taking our keys because we went to a lake?" "I'm taking them because you came into my house without calling and then asked Ellen to tell me what I wanted." "It put this in your head?" Every old instinct in me rose at once. I wanted to defend Mom, defend myself, list the missed visits, explain Mara, explain Lena, explain every hour that had brought us there. Mom looked at me. I stayed silent. That was my part of the decision. "This is my head," she told Nate. "It is old, not empty." Paul took his key from his ring first. He turned it between his fingers before placing it on the table. "So we're not welcome." "You are welcome when you ask me," Mom said. "Call me. Offer me a day you can keep. If it changes, tell me yourself." "What if you fall?" Nate asked. Then I used the emergency plan Ellen and I already made. These keys were for agreed visits. They were not permission to arrive whenever you needed to feel like a good son. Nate's face reddened. You're choosing paid company over family. I am choosing company that arrives when it says it will arrive. Family can do that too. He pulled his key free and set it down harder than Paul had. The sound was small. It seemed to move through the whole room. I hope this makes you happy, he said to me. I could have told him happiness was not what I felt. I felt sick, relieved, frightened, and tired. I felt the shape of our family changing before any of us knew what would fit in the space. But answering him would have placed me back between him and Mom. I said nothing. Paul left first. Nate followed without saying goodbye. Mom watched their cars pull away. That may have cost me visits, she said. I know. Pod'd tell me it didn't. Pod, stay for tea? Yes. We sat in the living room after the argument, and neither of us pretended the quiet was peace yet. The first blank Tuesday. The consequence arrived the following week in the form of an empty afternoon. Nate had told Mom he might come Tuesday afternoon. He did not put it on the calendar because, he said, it was not definite. Mom left the afternoon open anyway. At 2:30 he called me. Can you tell Mom I can't make it? Pod walking into a meeting. Then send her a message. She'll read it as rejection if it comes from me. Pods, I understood the temptation. If I called Mom, I could soften the edges and stop a lonely afternoon before it fully formed. It is your change, I said. She should hear it from you. Mom called at 5. He sent 4 words, she said. Can't today. Work thing. I'm sorry. Are you coming over? Ped was not my Tuesday evening. Lena and I were comparing dates for our first Sunday. Do you need me? Mom was quiet, long enough to make the question honest. No. I wanted you to make it less lonely. Pod closed my eyes. The boundary did not require me to become cold. I can stay on the phone for a while. That would be nice. Pod spoke for 20 minutes. I did not drive over and turn Nate's absence into my visit. The difference felt cruel even though I knew it was necessary. On Thursday, Mara came. Mom told her Tuesday had been lonely. Then she told Nate the same thing when he called Saturday. He called her, not me, the next morning. Could I come next Saturday? He asked. Mom told me about it afterward. What did you say? I said 10 o'clock and I said he had to knock. How did he take that? Head said, of course. Mom raised an eyebrow. We both knew trust would not be rebuilt by one word. Saturday at 10, Nate arrived at 9:58 and knocked. I was finishing the laundry before meeting Lena for coffee. Mom called, come in, and Nate stepped through the door carrying a bag of oranges. He held a folded sheet of paper toward me. These are the Saturdays I can probably do through August. I kept my hands around the laundry basket. Give it to Mom. Pod, then she can enter them with you. Pedges tightened. You have to make everything difficult now. Mom spoke from the kitchen. Nate. He looked toward her. Bring me the list, she said. I picked up my purse. You're leaving? He asked. I'm meeting Lena. What if Mom needs something? Mom called again. Ruth remains in the room. For the first time, Nate smiled a little. I walked into that one, he said. You did, Mom replied. It was not an apology. It was not forgiveness. It was one moment in which he heard her and adjusted his next sentence. I left them at the kitchen table. In the car, I fought the urge to text Mom and ask whether everything was all right. Instead, I drove to meet my daughter. Lena was already at the coffee shop. She had a paper calendar open beside 2 cups. I picked the 3rd Sunday, she said. You said I could choose. Pod, a family tradition. She laughed and slid the calendar toward me. We chose 3 Sundays. 12 weeks. The new arrangement did not become easy. It became clear. Paul returned his key and then disappeared for almost 3 weeks. Before, I would have sent him updates designed to invite a reply without accusing him. I would have told Mom he was busy. This time, I did neither. Mom called him herself. "I am not asking you to promise Saturdays," she told him. "I am asking whether you want a relationship with me that I don't have to borrow from Ellen." Ed said he needed time. "Take time," she said. "Just don't call it a visit." That was where they remained for a while. It hurt Mom. She never denied that. And I learned not to rush her grief toward a lesson. Nate came 2 Saturdays in a row, canceled the third, and told Mom directly. She was disappointed. He listened without asking me to translate. He did not get his key back. Mara came Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sometimes she and Mom ran errands. Sometimes they watched a movie. Once Mom paid her for 2 hours and spent most of that time asleep in the chair. When she woke, she said it was the most expensive nap of her life and worth every dollar. I kept my Tuesday evening visit. I still carried laundry downstairs because Mom's knee had not improved to make our family story convenient. I still answered late calls. I still loved her. What changed was the invisible reach around those choices. When Nate entered a Saturday, I did not confirm it. When Paul left a square blank, I did not fill it with an excuse. When Mom wanted another ride, she asked me directly, and I answered from the life I actually had. Sometimes the answer was yes. Once, for a library lecture on a Sunday Lena had chosen, the answer was no. Mom asked Mara. The world did not crack open. Lena and I kept our first Sunday at a riverside market. She bought peaches and made me carry them because, she said, motherhood should involve some labor. On the second Sunday, rain canceled our plan, so we stayed in her apartment and watched a documentary neither of us liked. She did not tell me the day was unimportant simply because it was ordinary. I joined a pottery class on Sunday afternoons in Marlow. I had wanted to try it for years, but the class required paying for 8 weeks in advance. I had always treated future time as something I could not honestly promise myself. The first bowl I made leaned to one side. The instructor called it expressive. I called it a bowl that needed the support of a wall. By the 8th week, I could center the clay without gripping it too hard. Paul finally called Mom on a Wednesday evening. They spoke for 14 minutes. I know the length because Mom told me, not because I monitored the call. He did not apologize for the lake weekend. He asked whether he could take her to lunch the following month. I told him to call when he knew the date, Mom said. How do you feel? Like I have one son trying badly, one son thinking slowly, and one daughter who is finally letting me have my own feelings about both. That sounds exhausting. Paid is also more honest. At 12 weeks, the calendar looked emptier than it had before the graduation. There were fewer colored blocks, and everyone belonged to the person whose name appeared on it. An ordinary Sunday. On the 12th Sunday, I was at the pottery studio glazing a plain blue bowl when my phone lit up beside the sink. For a second, the old alarm moved through me. I dried my hands and looked. It was a calendar notification. Mom had entered Mara for Thursday. Nate had entered Saturday at 10. Nobody had asked me to confirm either one. I read the notification once. Then I turned the phone face down and finished the rim of the bowl. After class, I drove to Lena's apartment. She was waiting on the porch with 2 cups of coffee and no emergency large enough to justify my presence. I climbed the steps anyway.